Thank you for stopping by at the Movie Marquee. While reviewing the movie Singles, we encountered some audio issues. We do apologize for the lower quality of this episode. We hope you still will enjoy the show. Thank you for stopping by at the Movie Marquee. Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome everyone to the Movie Marquee. Today's showing is the 1992 Cameron Crowe classic Singles. With me as always is Ken.
I'm probably sterile. It runs in my family.
And Ted.
My dad left home when I was 8. You know what he said to me? Have fun. Stay single. I was 8.
I was 8. And I'm Eric. A compliment for us is a compliment for you. Ted, tell us a little bit about the particulars of Singles.
Singles is directed by Cameron Crowe with a screenplay by Cameron Crowe. It has a running time of 99 minutes. It had a release date of September 18th, 1992. It had a budget of $9 million and a box office gross of $18.5 million. And an interesting fact about this, Warner Brothers actually held the film because they were unsure of what to do with it for almost 9 months before they released it. What caused them to release it when they did was the explosive success of Nirvana's Nevermind.
That makes perfect sense.
Rolling Stone put it this way on the 25th anniversary. It says, when Crowe sends Steve and Linda to see Soundgarden or Alice in Chains, he was also creating a time capsule of creativity, a fertile moment in the Pacific Northwest's crown jewel set in a millisecond just before Nirvana's Nevermind broke big. That's kind of one of those interesting things about when it was released. So they were kind of piggybacking off of Nirvana hitting huge. Singles has a starring cast, Bridget Fonda as Janet Livermore, Campbell Scott as Steve Dunn, Kira Sedgwick as Linda Powell, Matt Dillon as Cliff Ponsier, Sheila Kelly as Debbie Hunt, Jim Trufrost as David Bailey, and Bill Pullman as Dr. Jeffrey Jameson.
You're not going to mention Jeremy Piven and his outstanding role?
Oh yeah, no. Okay.
I know your love of Jeremy Piven, so that's why I brought it up there.
It's all about peace and understanding.
That's right, man. It's all about peace and understanding. What did the critics say? I know you said Rolling Stone seemed to like it. What did the others have to say?
Rolling Stone did like it, and of course Cameron Crowe had the relationship with Rolling Stone. But as far as Rotten Tomatoes goes, the critics' score is a certified fresh of 79%, and it has an audience score of 73%.
Not bad.
The positive critics that I found were quite a few. Dave Kerr from the Chicago Tribune gave it 3 out of 4 stars. Janet Maslin from the New York Times said, Mr. Crowe has an exceptional ability to enjoy such characters without a trace of condescension. And John Hartle of the Seattle Times says, this is one happy ending romance that doesn't feel forced. You can't help getting into the spirit of it. He gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars. Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times said, Singles is not a great cutting-edge movie, and parts of it may be too whimsical and disorganized for audiences raised on a cause-and-effect plot. But I found myself smiling a lot during the movie, sometimes with amusement, sometimes with recognition. It's easy to like these characters and care about them. 3 out of 4 stars. And I did find a few negative reviews. The first one was Jonathan Rosenbaum from the Chicago Reader. His consensus was, it's so lightweight that you're likely to start forgetting it before it's even over. And the staff of the magazine Time said, Singles may aspire to be a big chill from Seattle, but it's really a frizzled St. Elmo's fire with rowdier music. Sound like somebody stuffy was...
Wow.
Did he say rowdier than St. Elmo's Fire?
Rowdier music.
With rowdier music.
Rowdier music, okay, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Kathleen Maher of the Austin Chronicle. She says, Crowe fashions his characters' stories like a kid with a paste pot and Life magazine. Sometimes it works, but more often than not, it's just cute. In the editing, the characters' general style and attitude, Crowe seems to have drawn heavily from Slacker for inspiration. But in his insecure reliance on traditional narrative and Hollywood convention, he undermines his most interesting experimentations. As a result, Singles winds up being a date movie with pretensions. She ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. It sounds like the only person coming out of that with pretensions is her, in my opinion. We did have some cameos in this movie. You had mentioned Jeremy Piven as Doug Hughley, and you had Eric Stoltz as the mime. Tim Burton, the director, he was Brian. And of course, the great late Chris Cornell, he was Chris. And Eddie Vedder, Stone Gossard, and Jeff Ament all starred as themselves as the 3 other members of Citizen Dick. They make up the heart of Pearl Jam. Xavier McDaniel starred as himself. Alice in Chains, they starred as themselves. Soundgarden starred as themselves as well. And Paul Giamatti as the Kissin' Coffee guy.
That was a disgusting scene.
Is one of his first roles.
It should have been his last if that was the first role. I'm happy his career took off better than that. I watched that scene and I'm like, oh, I can't get that out of my head now. That is just not right.
It's tough, man. It's tough to get out of your head.
And our director, Cameron Crowe, he's the reporter who interviews Cliff Ponsier. Bruce Pavitt, he played Bruce one of the Expect the Best matches. Bruce is the founder of Sub Pop Records. It's the indie record label that signed Nirvana, Soundgarden, Mudhoney, and Tad.
You see the shirts on some of the guys, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Gus Van Sant, the director, he was one of the people moving furniture in and out of the apartment. A few cameos running around in there. I thought it was really cool that one of the things that Soundgarden and Alice in Chains, they didn't do any playback, so they played all of their stuff live. Everybody was on set. It was like being at a concert, literally.
And they sounded top tier, man. They're a good live band, both of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's when Alice in Chains was jamming right then. I mean, that's before the unfortunate passing of Lane Staley. And that's right when Soundgarden was taking off, too. It's really cool.
Not my music.
That's Seattle sound, man. That's Seattle. An interesting fact you said about the movie company holding the movie and then releasing it with Nirvana's Nevermind coming out.
Do we know how long it was held?
Like 9 months.
A couple months,
yeah, 9 months. They didn't know what to do with it.
So it was dated by the time it got released.
Wow. Well, it was ahead of its time before it got released.
Yeah, we'll discuss that further, but I thought Rolling Stone summed it up really well in the 25th anniversary interview that they did with Cameron Crowe when they said it's like a time capsule where they captured a moment in time just before all of the major music labels came in and stole everybody out of Seattle because Nirvana exploded with Nevermind. I love Nevermind, but that's not Nirvana's best album.
All right, and with that, let's talk about the plot on this one, Ken. Everyone's dying to know what the hell we're talking about.
All right, so we got some multiple stories here, so I'll be jumping around plots within the movie here. The story concerns a small group of 20-somethings who live and work in Seattle. Linda works for an organization that deals with the environment. She meets Luis, who pretends he's from Spain. The two begin dating. Linda's quite happy, gives him the remote control of her garage parking space. This is a big thing in this movie, is the remote control of a garage parking space. I never saw a movie about a remote control like this. And she's telling him that he's always welcome since he told her that he must go back to Spain due to his student visa running out. She sleeps with him before he leaves, or supposedly leaves. And then Linda goes out to a rock club with her friend and spots Louise at a bar with another woman. She leaves very upset. We meet Steve, who talks to, I guess, us in the kitchen. Steve lives in an apartment where several of the other characters live. Steve talks about his recent breakup and talks about the time when he was 8 when a doctor tried to explain how couples have children. Spam. Steve hopes that one day to build a luxurious commuter train for the city. Steve sees Linda in a rock club and approaches her. He tries to convince her that he doesn't have an act. She counters, saying not having an act is an act. Steve walks away rejected. But at a magazine rack with his friend Dave, Steve bumps into Linda again, and the two have a conversation. Then they go on a date and seem to enjoy each other's company. But Steve decides not to call her back for 4 days, and she basically breaks off with him. But he convinces her to give him one more chance. Steve tries to give her his remote to his garage parking space, and Linda says she has to leave, reminded of how she gave her remote to Louise, and he used her. Steve rings her doorbell, Linda jumps into his arms, and they kiss. They go upstairs to her place, and they have sex. And guess what? Linda's period? That's late. Steve buys her a home pregnancy test, and the results come back positive. She's going to have a baby. Steve asks her to marry him. She starts to think about it, but then while driving, Linda runs a yellow light and is violently broadsided by a pickup truck. She goes into shock and then wakes up in a hospital room. She had lost a baby. Depressed, she decides to tell Steve she's going to Alaska for a few weeks for her job. Steve becomes very depressed, and the mayor rejects his super train proposal. What a jerk. Steve becomes more depressed than ever. He quits his job, and his apartment becomes Oscar the Grouch's garbage can. Janet, one of his neighbors and a good friend, visits him and tells him that he needs to snap out of his depression. Steve begins to clean up his place and look for another job. While waiting for the response of his application, a knock comes at the door. He opens it to find Linda standing there. She's willing to give their relationship another try. The other story is Janet, who is 23 years old, works in a downtown coffee shop. She has a boyfriend, Cliff, who is the lead singer of the local rock punk band called Citizen Dick. Janet becomes somewhat obsessed with her breast size, especially since Cliff likes big breasts. She makes an appointment with a plastic surgeon. When she goes in for the procedure, Steve tries to talk her out of it. She says when looking for a man, she wants someone who has their own place, a steady job, and is responsible and appreciates her, and who will say God bless her when she sneezes. She later puts Cliff to that test, issuing a fake sneeze while sitting next to him, and he coldly hands her a box of tissues, asking her not to get him sick. The doctor surprises her and tells her he thinks she doesn't need the surgery. If Cliff can't appreciate her for who she is, then he doesn't deserve her. Janet decides to break up with Cliff because he didn't say, God bless you, and tries to make the best of her single life. Cliff tries to win her back by placing rose petals arranged in her name in her kitchen and putting a new stereo in her car, which, while he demonstrates how it works, basically shatters all the windows in the car. Now we go to Debbie, who is using a gift certificate she got from her friends in the apartment for a video dating service. They had originally got it for her as a gag gift. Debbie makes the video and receives videos from several candidates. She narrows the field to one guy, Jamie, who is a bike riding enthusiast. On the big day, however, Debbie goes to the wrong restaurant and misses Jamie entirely. She rides home and finds him there talking happily with her roommate Pam. Debbie is immediately jealous and accuses Pam of stealing her date. Debbie demands that Pam pay her money equivalent to the cost of the video. They haggle. I think it ends up being $85 in dishes. Debbie takes a vacation she's been planning on for a while. On the flight down, she sits next to a preteen boy who basically is trying to find everything he needs to know about her. When the flight lands, she meets the boy's single father, who compliments her on her weird earrings, and Debbie is immediately in love. Going back to Cliff, Cliff eventually realizes that he can only win Janet back if he treats her better. He leaves her a message on her answering machine, singing a new song he written for her. He meets her in the elevator of the building when they both are going out for the evening. He compliments her. When she suddenly sneezes, he says, bless you. The two then start making out. And then the film ends with an overhead shot of the apartment building that zooms out, showing the Seattle skyline with a bunch of voices chattering about love, relationships, and, of course, complaining. The end.
Well put. I liked your little commentary on some of the stuff there.
Well,
I was going to throw in a line from Dogma. You didn't say God bless you. You're getting off light. Love that line. Getting off light.
Yeah, she should have shot him right there.
Should have shot him right there. Ken, when's the first time you saw this movie?
So throughout the 90s, I was just kind of in and out of this movie on cable, catching it here, catching it there, but never watching it straight through. The podcast is the first time that I've watched it from beginning to end. I went ahead and rented it on Amazon Prime. It was for $1.99. I was on sale. Maybe still on sale if you haven't watched it yet. You might want to check it out. And I got 3 watches in it within a 48-hour period. Me and Ted talked about this earlier before the podcast. I was about 20, 21 when I knew about this movie. I wasn't really into the newer music yet at that time. I was kind of already set in my own ways with my own type of music that I liked. To be honest, the Seattle sound, though I don't hate it, it's not something I sought out. I wasn't a Nirvana fan. I wasn't a Soundgarden. I didn't like any of that kind of music, really. There was a song here and a song there that I liked. Like I liked In Bloom by Nirvana. But in general, wasn't huge. I was still into classic rock at the time. So this movie wasn't something that was drawing me in at that moment.
And now we can make the argument that all this music now is thrown into the classic rock genre.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, I know, man, I know. All right, Ted, how about you? When did you first see it?
I saw it when I was in high school. It would have been a rental probably from Blockbuster. I mean, this is right when I was in high school. The Seattle sound, I don't like that term necessarily. It's grunge. I don't necessarily like grunge. That's what it is. Alternative music is pretty much what I always referred to it as. But these bands are my jam. Nirvana was huge in my life at this point in time. I've always liked Pearl Jam as well. And Soundgarden, of course.
Are you a Hole fan?
Yes and no. They're more hit and miss for me, but I can see their attraction to some people. All of these bands that came out of Seattle, for the most part, there were some hits and misses, of course, but they really captured an angst that I related to being a teenager in a small town in central Illinois. That angst spoke to my friends as well. This is the type of music we listened to. We wore flannel and cut off jeans, and this is what we did. This movie spoke to me in a lot of ways. But I will say this movie has a very optimistic point of view, whereas a lot of other movies from this time have a very negative look and attitude towards people from this generation. I want to come back to that point a little bit later because I have some problems with how some other films where this is a more positive film. When did you see it for the first time, Eric?
I remember it like it was yesterday because it was pretty damn close. It was November 27th, 2021, on the flight back from California. I, too, rented it and watched it. It kept my attention. I wasn't sure what to expect. I've never seen the movie. I've never seen parts of the movie. A scene here and there, like when the windows explode in the car after he installs the radio. But other than that, I really hadn't seen anything. So I was going in completely blind on it. And I watched it, I think, once or twice after that for the rental, and I was surprised, man. I liked it. I thought the music carried this movie. I mean, you've got your stories, obviously, but it all revolves around the music scene. And if you didn't have the music scene, this movie would be really bad and really different. But it's Cameron Crowe. You have to have the music.
Yeah, it would be tough.
It would be Sleeping in Seattle or Got Mail.
Sleepless in Seattle.
Sleepless in Seattle, yeah.
It relies on this point in time. Around the 25th anniversary release of this movie, Cameron Crowe gave a really long interview to Rolling Stone. Big surprise because his relationship with Rolling Stone. Because, see, this is the thing. Kathleen Maurer from the Austin Chronicle, she makes the comment about Slacker, which I have a problem with that as well because this movie has nothing in common with that movie. He had come off, just have watched Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee, and about how that movie showcased Brooklyn. And he had delved into Manhattan by Woody Allen.
One of my favorite Woody Allen movies.
And a great movie. In both of those movies, Brooklyn plays as a character in that movie and Do the Right Thing. And of course, Manhattan in New York is a character in all of the early Woody Allen movies. It's a literal character. Just like we had said, too, about Martin Scorsese with Taxi Driver. New York was a character in that movie.
We also said it about When Harry Met Sally, that New York played a part in that as well.
Right.
Which I think is more closer to this movie than the other ones that you just named.
Yeah, but this is what Cameron had said. He had said that he had watched Manhattan.
He's wrong, man.
He had watched Manhattan and Do the Right Thing. And he wanted to make a similar type of movie about his favorite city. And his favorite city that he lived in was Seattle.
That's a very interesting cross-section if you think about it, going, hey, Woody Allen's Manhattan and Do the Right Thing, both incredible movies, but they are pretty far apart on the spectrum when it comes to the acting styles and the directing styles.
True. The point is that he wanted to make a movie that showcased a city, his favorite city, kind of like how those movies showcased New York and Brooklyn. And that's why he chose to do this movie and make it essentially Seattle as a character in this movie. Like you had said, the music is a huge part of this. And in that early 90s, this was the hotbed for new music. It was before any of these bands had been quote-unquote discovered. They lived in their own little environment where all of these bands were theirs. It's crazy if you think about it. part of the reason that Cliff's character works in the coffee shop is because that's what two of the members of Pearl Jam did early in their career. It was either when they were in the early iterations of Pearl Jam, they were Mudhoney and Mother Love Bone and Green River.
And we all know Seattle's reputation with coffee.
Right, that's what these guys did in a coffee shop and then went out and played music at night. That's how they fueled their love of their music. And so in a similar vein, you can see where those connections. And I really take offense to the whole idea that Slacker got pasted onto our generation as the Generation X. And that movie, which is by Richard Linklater, is one, not his best movie by any stretch of the imagination. But that movie ends up being slapped on our generation as that's us, that we're slackers. And I think that's unfair. I think what you see from these characters is actually a more realistic view of Generation X than anything in the movie Slacker.
For me, I didn't think that Seattle took unlike Manhattan and unlike Do the Right Thing, or even some of the other movies we moved, I just didn't feel that Seattle was a big focus, wasn't a main character. Because I felt like this could almost be anywhere. They didn't really concentrate on the coffee shops. The places that they went to, I felt like I would have been in those type of bars when I was in my 20s. I think it might have been also when I really invested in this movie, which is now compared to, let's say, 30 years ago. I don't think it's as strong as a character as the movies that you just named. I agree with you on the Slacker issue. I think this movie and I think prior to this one, Say Anything, are more realistic to our generation, or at least my generation, being Generation X. I think these two movies represent it better. I don't know if this represents it as well as Say Anything did, because I related to those characters better than I related to these characters. And it's something you probably will bring up later, but I'll just bring up now really quick, and then we could touch on it now or later. It doesn't matter to me. It's just too much of a happy ending. Everything is kind of tied up with a nice little bow and a ribbon. Everybody except for the one friend who was that kind of hat that he wears.
Beret.
A beret. He's wearing that beret. He disappears in the second half of the movie. We don't even know whatever happens to the poor soul.
I didn't like him anyway, so it was no big loss.
But they focus on Debbie. Who cared about Debbie, really? I mean, I hate to say it, but Debbie was annoying. I could care less about what happened to Debbie. In fact, I was happy when that guy hit on her roommate. But the main focus is on the two couples. That's really what the movie is about. The other two, we really just don't care. But I just feel like it was just too happy. And I understand we have happy ending in Say Anything.
Happy endings.
But at the same time, her father goes to jail, so we see bad things happen to people who do the wrong things. I mean, look at the Matt Dillon character, and at the end, he still gets the girl, even though he's a complete jerk to her 90% of the movie. And it's just the last 15, 20 minutes of the movie that he starts doing these little things, and I don't even know.
But let's be honest, man. She was a little borderline stalker in that movie. She kind of set herself up for failure.
Yeah, but he was all about himself.
But he didn't hide it, though. That's the whole thing.
No, but at the same time, he just comes off being kind of a jerk. And does the band actually break up? You don't even hear about the band in the last part of the film. So like the last 15, 20 minutes, the band disappears. I'm wondering if the band doesn't work anymore. And that's why he's going back to Janet, because Janet is now...
Ken, it's Pearl Jam, man.
Well, yeah, they had to kick him out. But now he doesn't have a band, so that's why he's going to be nice to her. And as soon as he's interested in being a band again, he's going to just treat her like a jerk. I thought it was a little bit of a forced ending to their relationship. It wasn't as natural as the other relationship, which I think was the main story of this film. I thought their relationship tackled the real life issues that are going on. However, I still have issues with those two. We'll talk about that as we move along here with the podcast.
I just want to go back to one thing that you had said about Seattle not being... No, the city may not be a character, but it's the whole identity of Seattle that is the character here. And it's that whole snapshot of time where Seattle was basically undiscovered, and you had all of these musicians and all of this music, because music plays a huge part in the whole movie. Other than that, you're creating a fictional town. You couldn't take Singles and move it to another city. If you took Singles and moved it to Los Angeles, it's not the same movie.
They got to be the hair bands if they're in L.A.
Right, and that's what Cameron Crowe was saying in the interview. at this point in time where the hair metal was dying and moving out, you didn't have these guys that worked at the coffee shop all day and hustled and did everything that they could, worked as flower delivery guys, and then beat the ground at night, getting their bands out there. That wasn't happening in LA. So you couldn't take the heart of this movie and move it to a different city.
I totally disagree with you on that, because being around people who were in bands and people who were in bands and had other jobs, I feel like this could have been placed in almost any type of area. I mean, you probably don't want to put it in an area like LA, but if you put it in a Chicago suburb, for instance, I think you could still get away with it. I think you can put it in any suburb of any metropolitan city and get away with it.
No, these bands need to play in the downtown urban area. It can't be suburban.
They go out to the city to see them. That's what you did when we were teenagers in early 20s. We would go out and see bands all over the place. You had bands like this. Now, granted, maybe the bands were a little later, because like you said, Nirvana was the big deal. So once Nirvana had a big hit...
Well, they were the catalyst.
Right.
I mean, that was the atomic bomb that brought the entire microscope of everything onto Seattle. I mean, that's what blew everything up. And that was Nevermind. See, Nirvana had been a band for almost 10 years before Nevermind took off. These guys struggled. If you're going to say Chicago, and it's interesting that you put Chicago, because the only band that represents outside of Seattle that's really on the soundtrack is the Smashing Pumpkins. They're, of course, from Chicago. They're from the suburbs. I believe Glen Ellen.
I'm not a real Pumpkins fan. They kind of annoy me.
They're okay, but they're definitely part of the sound.
Oh, yeah, they were definitely part of it.
This is a snapshot of this point in time just before Nirvana blew up Seattle, and Seattle became the it location. And so everything's just kind of undiscovered yet. I mean, Starbucks is not on every other street corner at this point in time. Starbucks is just a little coffee shop.
It's a regional coffee, yeah.
These stories maybe could move, but the actual music part of this couldn't go other places.
Well, I think it could, but I think here's the thing. I think based on when it's made. So in 91, 92, no, it doesn't fit anywhere else but Seattle. But if you go a couple years later, it fits more different places because everybody wanted to be Seattle all of a sudden. If we're looking at a couple years later, I think you can make it anywhere.
Right, because everybody then tried to mimic Seattle, which turned out some horrific music. There's something in that Northwest there that created the sound, and I've seen that discussed on a couple of different Nirvana documentaries and mentioned that there's just something about that Northwest area that really fueled this revolution. Something was going on there that caused this.
Definitely a time capsule. The magazine stand, I'm looking at all the magazines in the background and
Right.
and noticing and recognizing some of those magazines, like the Madonna magazine that was back there, and I'm like, oh, I know that one.
Yeah.
The only thing is, because it's Seattle,
Or they have a newsstand.
where they have a new
Right,
See,
exactly, yeah.
That's and being a suburb boy, we don't have all the stuff that they have. I never walked past, unless I went to the city, see a newsstand. I'm like, what happens if it rains? It's also Seattle, by the way. Did it rain only once? Did Seattle have the best weather?
That's one of those big myths, but yeah.
Oh, it's a big myth that it rains a lot in
it,
Seattle.
it doesn't rain every day in Seattle. but
Okay.
Practically.
It does rain a lot.
It does rain a lot, but I think there was only one rain scene, and I think that's when he broke up with her. And by the way, he walks past the mime, and I'm thinking, I didn't even know that was Eric Stoltz. By the way, man, I had no clue.
Not until I realized. Not until I read it.
Not until I read it. Yeah, I was like, that was Eric Stoltz. Wow. He goes from being the rooster here and Say Anything here now to being a mime. I'm starting to think he's having some career choices issues.
Well, this is before his big role in Pulp Fiction. He's awesome.
He has some success earlier in movies like Mask and Some Kind of Wonderful. I like both of those movies. They might be a little dated now, but I do like them. I had a hard time relating with the garage door opener. I was just like, really? This is what, the MacGuffin that we've talked about in the past with MacGuffins?
The MacGuffin, yeah.
This is the MacGuffin is the stupid garage door opener. When she goes to a special garage door opener shop and looks at all these different garage door openers, I'm like, seriously? You have a line of models?
One had a pager with it. I mean, if you talk about dating us. You know, that was something that, no, I couldn't relate to it. I mean, because I grew up in small town Illinois, but it's something that I understand to a certain extent because I've known people that lived in the city, and that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So
Huge.
to give somebody their clicker, and I can only imagine parking's got to be a big deal. And I can't really come up with a comparison ring. The only stupid thing that comes to my mind is, ironically, Luis gives her, I guess, a promise ring.
Yeah.
And she gives him the clicker,
Yeah.
and it's like they're almost equivalent, if not the clicker meaning a little bit more.
She goes and buys a new one. She's like, oh, just give me the best one. I mean, I'm thinking, what does the best one do? What's in the best What's in the best one? Does it like pepper spray come out if like somebody tries to attack you? And then I'm thinking about the pen at Say Anything. Because the pen was kind of like almost a MacGuffin there because it represented the relationship between her and her father and her and Lloyd. And here you have the clicker, which is being passed down between these relationships. And then they're making out at the end, and then the garage door goes up and down. And I'm sorry, that was stupid. I'm sorry. I wasn't.
Ultimately, we'll never know because I never read an interview where it was ever brought up. I'm hoping that this is not right because I like the idea that the clicker means something to these people because of the importance of parking. But I hope he didn't include the clicker just to have that joke.
Yeah, I know, you're probably right, because at the beginning of the movie, Linda's character basically talks about getting her own place and getting her own parking space. It was a big thing for her. She was very proud of that moment. And I thought it was kind of a weird way to start the film, but now that we talked it out, I kind of get it a little bit more. And I would have liked to seen a little bit more about her instead of jumping right into this little romance by this guy who pretends that he's from Spain. I think he did a great job with the accent. Give him kudos on that.
Okay, well, this is a question that I have. Was he faking the accent?
We don't know.
We don't hear him again.
Yeah, we never hear him again, and that was a question that I had. Was he just putting everything on?
I think he was.
I think that kind of sets up her relationship going forward. I think it's just the right length. This is actually one of those rare times where a montage sequence just kind of actually works. It does what it's supposed to do. The ramifications of this is supposed to have some sort of effect later on, but it's not a massive part.
Well, she's also got the other boyfriend that she lives with, that she goes back to later on.
No, he doesn't live with her. He doesn't live with her.
They never lived with it the first time around? Okay.
After she breaks up with our main man, Steve, then he moves in. Are you talking about Andy?
Yeah, the really weird-looking dude.
Yeah, I hate him.
Yeah.
But she's actually one of the only people that doesn't have a roommate. The whole thing with her and Lewis, it sets up the fact that you get immediately that she's very trusting. She's a good person. She's just looking for a right guy.
Looking for love in all the wrong places.
That's the weird thing. Is she looking for love? I guess she's torn because she goes back and forth. She goes back to the Andy character, and Andy is nothing about love. There's nothing about love about him, even though he says, I love you. Like, they sit there and they're an old couple already. They're already like 70 years old, reading the paper and switching it back and forth. I actually have never been a big Kira Sedgwick fan. I've been never crazy in really any of the roles that she's been in, except for maybe the TV show that she was in, and I don't even remember it because it's not that important to me. Not bad here. I actually like her here, but in general, there just seems something off about most of these characters. Even Campbell Scott, Steve, I really wanted John Cusack in this particular role. I think if you have John Cusack in this role, especially at the beginning when he's talking to us, the audience, because I'm like thinking, who is he talking to? I'm waiting for them to pan to like a roommate or a friend or even a little kid or something. Because
I like breaking the fourth wall when they're doing
I like
that.
it, but then when he yells out to Matt Dillon's character and he yells out, he's like, I'm talking here. It's like you're talking to no one. You're talking to us, which I like to a certain extent, but when you start talking to somebody else, it kind of throws everything off for me. But I would have liked to seen Cusack in here. It would have been better. And they're not consistent with it. If they would have done that more often throughout the film, talking with the audience, then maybe it would have been better. I think they do it another time later on. And
They do it like 3 or 4 times.
Is it 3 or 4 times? I don't know. I just feel like it's just a couple of times. His character is very much like Lloyd because he says all the right things. He does all the right things. The only mistakes he does is not being true to his heart, but everything that he thinks she wants to hear, he says it. She even says, you always say the right things. It's very much like Lloyd's character in Say Anything. He always does and says the right things. I can see the heartbreak in both of them, but I think I like John Cusack's Lloyd a little bit more when it comes to the heartbreak and dealing
Oh
with the
yeah,
heartbreak.
no, clearly.
I don't know. They're two separate characters. One, they're in two different parts of their life at this point. John Cusack's character is saying anything's coming out of high school. Campbell Scott's character, Steve, is in the workforce. I mean, he's out of college. They're at two different points in their life. I think that's kind of unfair to Steve's character to compare him to somebody who's just entering into college.
Yeah,
coming out of high
but you know,
school.
Steve's character is not nearly as likable as Cusack's character in Say Anything.
No, he's a different character.
Is he a different character? Because I feel like he's an extension
completely.
of Lloyd just a few years later.
No.
I don't know. I think he is. The only thing is he's more ambitious.
The person who's the more connected to Lloyd would be Cliff. Cliff does everything that he's passionate about, and that's what Lloyd does. Lloyd is into kickboxing, and that's pretty much his whole life goal. Whereas Steve has a job that basically is what happens to a lot of people. He's a very relatable character. A lot of people came right out of college with their degree, and they found themselves into something that they were kind of passionate about.
I'm not talking about work, though. I'm talking about relationships.
That's a whole big part of the story.
Well, I mean, if you're going to talk about their work, because once they start getting together, you don't hear about their work until they basically break up and then they go invest themselves back into their work again. I think how he talks to the camera, it's a Cusack thing. Cusack does that in multiple movies that he does. I'm not sure about Campbell Scott after this or before this, if he really did anything.
He's done a few things. Nothing huge. I mean, he was never a massive star. Most recently, he was in House of Cards, which was a huge success for Netflix.
Well, who wasn't, though? Greg Kinnear was in it.
He's had bit roles here and there. He's a stage actor. People might know him if you watch the History Channel. They have a series of shows, Those Who Built America. He's the narrator for those shows. He's done things. He's not like I said, he's not a massive star.
I'm not saying that he does
really,
anything wrong
outside
here.
of Matt Dillon at the time, none of these people were huge stars.
I don't know. I think Bridget Fonda was doing pretty well by this particular
Yeah,
point.
when did she do Single White Female?
Through this.
Was this after?
So Bridget Fonda, well, she had some movies though even before this. So she had Single White Female came out before Singles.
Oh, well,
and Doc Hollywood, she was in The Godfather 3. That wasn't a huge role.
She was in The Godfather 3?
Yeah.
Yes, she was.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So
it's been a long time since I've seen that.
So
she's also a Fonda.
She's also a Fonda, exactly.
Right.
That usually helps.
But that's why Matt Dillon and her, they get top credit.
And you can argue that Bridget Fonda is the most successful of everyone in this particular movie.
The rock bands are the most successful.
It can happen to you, City Hall, Jackie Brown.
She hasn't done anything since 2002.
That's because she retired.
Yeah, because she's married to Danny Elfman.
Yeah, but what's Matt Dillon did since Something About Mary? I couldn't guess right off the top of my head.
He makes movies now. He's a producer.
Yeah, but I think in the 90s, I mean, especially, I had a huge crush on Bridget Fonda in the 90s. Like Eric said, though, she's a Fonda, so that's probably why she got top billing.
Well, she was a legitimate star. Just reeled off all the movies that she was in.
Yeah, she had some decent ones out there. I was talking to a friend earlier today about Matt Dillon. I'm kind of surprised at the slide of his career. He was strong there in the 80s into the early 90s, and then he just kind of, got older. I guess it happens to the best of us, but I'm kind of surprised. We looked at other movies of Cameron Crowe, and a lot of these people went on to bigger and better things. I mean, you got Jerry Maguire, and then we also talked about Almost Famous. These actors had a little bit more careers than I think this cast did after this movie. I still think they did a good job overall. We were talking about the Debbie character earlier. It's just an annoying character. I mean, it doesn't deserve the screen time it gets. I mean, she's good in little spurts, but to give her her own little storyline.
It's not a major storyline.
It's in there enough for me to say, really? That's how I'll look at it. What do you think, Eric? I haven't heard you on this part. What's your thought about it?
I think if you pull it out, it really doesn't take anything away from the movie. I don't want to say it's distracting. It kind of builds a little, but it's not really needed, no.
Like I said, the other character, what was his name, David?
Yeah.
Yeah. You take out David, and nobody notices. The only reason why we notice is because we do a podcast. But last thing you hear from him is probably talking about the bicycle guy. Yeah, go out with the bicycle guy. I still wish they would have said, hey, go with the guy that said, I'm very lonely.
Yeah.
At least the one guy just said, go out with the guy at the end. He seemed pretty nice.
Yeah, that whole cast of the people on the dating
Yeah, they
videos
were-
are creepy.
How about the magician with the balloon?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But that was
I
typical.
can't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
yeah.
great.
So much different than today.
Here's a sad thing. In about 1994, 95, I did that.
You made a video?
I made a video.
Oh.
No way.
Yes,
Oh.
way. I went to this place. I don't remember the name of it. It was in Schaumburg over by the Woodfield Mall.
Glamour shots?
And I went in there, and of course, everybody's nice to you. All the women that walk past you will say, oh, he's cute. They're just saying that because
They're on the payroll.
They're on the payroll, and I'm sitting here going, well, why do I need a video if I'm walking by you and you're thinking I'm cute? But yeah, I went ahead and gave it a shot. It didn't last very long. There was some type of trial that I was on, so I gave it a shot, said a little bit about myself. I wasn't flying like Superman or anything like that. Tim Burton wasn't directing my video, I guess.
Right.
My video was just me sitting on a stool, just kind of talking about myself and the things that I liked and everything. And I got some hits, and I went on a couple of dates.
Did you?
They were, yeah. I mean, I might have been the creepy one out of the two. Who knows? It was at least an experience. At least I had the cojones to make it happen.
Okay, definitely.
You put yourself
You do.
out there.
That's crazy. I did not know that.
My question is, how do we get?
I
our
want that
hands
video.
on Ken's tape?
How we get?
Oh yeah, where is it, Ken?
Thank
you
you
got
that it was pre-internet, or the internet really took off.
It's so much different now.
I'm sure once I take office, the presidency, they'll probably surface somewhere else.
I'm sure it will. There's some lady in the Chicago suburbs
With
has
a 30-year-old
video of
kid,
Ken.
be like, Dad, I did not have sex with any of these women. So just to put that out there.
Sure
No.
you didn't. I thought all of those guys that were on that video, I thought that was funny.
It was very funny. I rewound that scene to watch it again.
The last
Right after
couple
it rolled, I thought,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, what did I miss? This is great.
The last couple of guys on there, you almost see serial killer.
Clearly.
And-
oh, yeah.
And,
Oh, definitely.
and of course, when you're talking about the Northwest for some reason has had a more than their share. Somebody's using that for not right.
I think that guy at
motives.
the end lost his clicker, and I think he was just very
I
lonely.
think that last guy was he had a body count.
What I appreciate about that
It
video
is for some reason.
is
up
they
there.
put the right guy that she was supposed to go out with in the middle. He wasn't the
the
last
middle,
guy
yeah.
like they would normally do. They put him in the middle to mix it all up, and then they refer back to him. But again, I would have loved to see at least one of them chose the guy at the end or the magician or something. And be like, oh, I want to see the magician. Like I would have said something like, yeah, take the magician. I want him to perform at a party or something for us.
I think they were all too shocked to come to even do that. Obviously, somebody that they've become quasi friends with. You want to see this person do good. You're batting for them. And then they show up with something like that. And it's like, what do you really say? It's like too shocking for words almost.
And that's
at
the
that
weird
point.
thing about this is their friendships. They buy this for her as a gag gift. I would only buy a gag gift for somebody that I'm really friends with. Really weird about their relationships. Like you said, quasi friends. They're friends that live near
They're
each
neighbors.
other.
They all live in the building.
They're neighbors.
Yeah, they're all neighbors.
Yeah, and I don't know if any of them would be friends if they were not, neighbors. Maybe.
Probably not.
All of these characters are just coming right out of college. And this is kind of like an extension of the dorm life. They're all going to the same clubs and everything. They have common interests. And the fact that they live close together, it all makes sense. There's no big stretches. Yeah, the Debbie thing, it probably goes on maybe a couple of scenes too much. But she is also part of the crew. Her underlying story thing, she's like a sorbet. She acts as like a palate cleanser between the two love romances.
I don't know. I think she's more like if you accidentally drink window washer or something like that. I think that's more like what she is.
What, you died? I mean, she doesn't kill the movie.
No, she doesn't
you're
kill
on
the
mute.
movie. I actually think her meeting this guy at the end who... I think I see him in other movies. I think he played
He's been in a lot of other
I think he played a big lawyer in Legally Blonde. But he looks like he's 30 years older than she is.
Mm-hmm, yes.
And that's just creepy. It came off creepy at the end there. I thought they were going the right direction with her, and then at the end when we see him with this guy, it's just
But I like the fact the way they wrapped it up. They wrapped it up with Matt Dillon telling us the rest of the story.
Yes, I will agree with you.
And then she's done.
But you have Matt Dillon kind of wrapping everything up. But shouldn't it be the Steve character? Because he's the one that's actually talking at the beginning. I feel like he should be the one that's telling the stories.
Out of the 4 main characters, the only one that doesn't talk to the viewer is Kira Sedgwick's character.
Thank you, Cameron Crowe, for that.
And as far as Stone Gossard, one of his big roles that a lot of people might remember him from, he was one of the lawyers in The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
By the way, I just want to throw this out there because I just remembered this. You had the Linda character, and she had a friend that she goes out dancing and she works with. And I looked her up on the IMDb, and she really hasn't anything else out there except some voice work for some Star Trek games. But she's a realtor, and she's selling houses out in, I think, in California. So if you're interested, she has 3 houses for sale. One's $500,000, and the other 2 are over $1 million.
Are you looking?
Yeah.
Stalker.
Hey, I was looking for a house. I was just kind of curious when actors like that who are in a film, what happened? Did they drop off? I mean, she went to school for theater, and she's barely in any movies, and then she drops off, and I just find out that
sometimes it doesn't work
actual realtor. So that's
Stalker.
I'm lonely.
Yes, sometimes it just
very,
doesn't work out.
Very, very lonely.
Yeah, exactly right. I like the fact that Debbie's character has a little storyline just so we get those pictures.
That does make the movie. So I'm happy that she's in the movie because of that, because that is my favorite part in the whole movie.
Even when she goes to the place to record it, those people are weird. And of course, one of them's Tim Burton. Big surprise.
Wasn't she going for like a rock video audition or something?
No.
She had all of her different looks that she was trying to do. And then that lady just creepily goes, just let me take over.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa.
I'll make men worship at your feet or something like that. Yeah.
And then they come up with that weird video. Why is this a 90s movie thing where they have to mispronounce somebody's famous's name? And she
the Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, Martin Scorsese's name.
Martin Scorsese. Yeah.
It's an almost identical joke that's played years later in Showgirls, where she talks about a Versace dress. You guys have never seen
I've seen the movie.
My virgin eyes, Ted. I've never seen
But the fact that you know any type of dialogue from that movie says a lot about you.
It is one of those so bad movies that you've had to have seen.
Total guilty pleasure.
Not even a guilty pleasure. No.
No, that's one of those things that I remembered from it. The Versace dress.
The Versace.
Everybody our age had to see that movie because
Saved by the Bell.
Because it was Saved by the Bell, Elizabeth Berkley.
I never saw a pool that looked so dirty in my life. It's cringe.
One of the worst scenes in the history of video of any movie ever made. It is so horrible.
It's definitely up there.
It's so horrible, it's funny. You can't help but laugh. But back to something that's actually good. We'll talk about Singles. Debbie, she's in it just the right amount. She's not a huge undercurrent storyline. The main story is between our 4 people who are in love. I liked Bridget Fonda's character. The only person out of the 4 main characters I really didn't care for was Cliff. I wasn't a big fan of his. I thought she was too deep for him because he's very superficial. If there is one character that's a stereotype in the entire movie, he's a stereotype.
It's the interview that he gives about the meaning of the song.
Right.
The meaning for the song. That's where I lose interest in him as a character right there because he doesn't have anything valuable to say. He's really a no-talent hack.
And that's what that review says.
Yeah.
And Eddie Vedder stops reading the review, partially because he's like, I don't want to hear about
anything negative.
Negative. But they read it, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
The person who was doing the review wanted him to move to LA so he can fade into the background like other no-talent hacks. I mean,
by the way, was that really Jimi Hendrix's grave that he was playing the guitar at?
Yes. And shortly after that, he was disinterred and moved to Buy Closer by his family. And now he has a headstone and everything fitting one of the greatest rock and rollers of all time.
Yeah, because I thought when I saw that part, I was like, maybe that's not real because that's so basic.
No,
looking.
That's how it was back in the day.
And the fact that anybody just go to the gravesite of a rock legend, I mean...
The cemetery in Paris that Jim Morrison's in. I don't know if they put like a fencing around it or something, because one, it was vandalized all the time. People kept leaving a whole bunch of stuff there. Dude, that's a whole cottage industry, finding out where famous people are buried. One of those macabre type of hobbies that some people have, but it's a thing.
And I know this is cliche, but I really kind of wanted the Janet character to end up with the doctor.
I thought that's the direction it was going.
Yeah.
I thought that's how it was going to go, too. Because it's been a long time since I'd seen the movie, and I'd forgotten. But I thought that was kind of how it was going to go. Because you kind of like Bill Pullman's character, even though he is kind of a square. Here again, he was 33, and she's like 23, so he's not going to be into the same things that she's in. He's not going to go to the clubs. He's obviously not that type of a guy. I thought one of the funniest parts of him is that he worked for a plastic surgery place that was entitled HMO.
I'm just thinking, though, how she talks to him. She talks to him like, oh, you're cute, and if we'd messed this up, girls would go for you. Yeah, most definitely. I would have liked to seen them go on a date and then realize, yeah, it's not going to work. I think that would have played off a little bit better. It's like that nice guy. You want that nice guy to succeed. You want to know what happened to the doctor. Did he find the right girl? I like the fact that he was like, you know what? You don't need it. I'm doing this to everybody else, but out of all the people that I've met, you're the one that doesn't need to get breast implants.
Totally hitting on her.
How many times has he really used that line?
I think he was intrigued because they're playing with the button to do the enhancing of the breast, and she makes him like, really big.
That was pretty funny.
And he goes, do you go jogging?
Right, that was pretty funny.
Let's meet it halfway. I think that interaction there made him do that. I don't think he had an interaction with anybody like that before.
I think he is a nice guy character, but we're looking at this from the 40-year-old eyes. He's a nice guy, but he is not into anything that she's into. He's not into going to the concert venues and being part of the scene. He's exited that part of his life.
We don't see her doing those things. We see her on top of the roof.
She's dating a rock star.
She's dating a rock star, but we don't actually see her go to the rock places. We see her hanging out upstairs. We see her on top of the roof, just chilling out. She just seems kind of all around cool. And I think she can get along with almost anybody.
And the doctor's not.
And the doctor's not. Then again, she ends up with him because he says, God bless you at the end.
But do we really think that it's going to last?
No.
I don't think that it's going to really last. The only couple here that has a real shot at a future is Kara Sedgwick's character. And
they probably broke up 2 more times before they got it right.
Somebody else in a review that I had read, that's one of the real parts of this, because everybody's known people and friends that they break up and they get back together. They just go through this cycle thing. That's actually a very real life. I think it's a very relatable thing, and I don't necessarily think that Bridget Fonda's character and Matt Dillon's character, they're not going to end up together for much longer. I think once she finally loses interest, because she's obviously smarter than he is. I mean, she wants to be an architect. She has goals.
Like George Costanza.
And Cliff doesn't really have a goal type of a thing.
I mean, he's got goals, but I think he's so self-absorbed. To try to sell me in about 10 or 15 minutes that he's changed 180 degrees, that's too much of a stretch.
But he made an effort enough to get her back. We've all been around people that have had that sort of thing happen as well, where a guy just does just enough to get somebody back.
It's like,
and it happens.
I've been in the same relationship, where I was interested in a girl, and she stringed me along, and then I said, you know what? I'm not going to play this game anymore. I left. It's amazing how they try to come back, and it's like, no, you had your chance, and I was interested in you here, and now I've moved on. And I think that's why I don't like this situation, because with me, once I've moved on, I moved on. And I felt her character moved on well past the point of going back. So I had a problem with that.
I don't know. I never really bought the whole idea that she had moved on.
I thought she sold it pretty good, because at no time after she broke up with him did she seem like she was sad or depressed. She seemed like she was living her best life. And in fact, she was helping others. She just seemed to have her crap together finally, because she finally left him. And the fact that she was so obsessed with him to begin with, and now she's like the opposite. I just didn't like to go back. I think I would have liked to have seen her, if not with the doctor, at least with somebody else. Not Matt Dillon's Cliff, because, again, I don't like this character. He's not likable. Kind of disappointing, and it kind of leaves me at the end of the movie going, I wish they didn't end the movie with them. If they would have switched the endings around, maybe I would have felt a little better about how the movie ended, because I think the other story is more believable. It's a more, yay, they got back together type of relationship. Let's end the movie there. But you're ending it with Janet and Cliff. I think it's the wrong way to end it.
Well, I think what's going to happen with those two characters is she's going to end up moving out of the apartment complex. And that's going to be the end of their relationship. I think that's the whole idea of this apartment complex. Matt Dillon's character does kind of allude to that when he is doing, I think it is the final talk to the audience, where he says that this is basically the apartment complex is kind of like a way station where people come.
Singles come.
Right. And they sit there, and when they move on, that's when things have changed.
And he says he'll be the one that will stay there forever because...
Exactly.
He's a solo artist.
And she's not.
Says all this, and then the next scene in the elevator, they're back together. So that's the other thing I didn't like. I would have liked a little bit more build up. It just seemed like it was kind of like a forced ending, really quick. Boom, they're together. End of movie.
I think it's sweet. He's finally acting nice. You had mentioned at the beginning, I think he did get kicked out of the band.
Yeah.
I think he did too.
They obviously had a bad gig when they went to Portland, because then that next day, Cliff's lamenting that there are no anthems of our generation, which is ironic because in like 4 months, Nirvana would blow up with Nevermind and Smells Like Teen Spirit.
And they're ignoring him. They're watching the thing about the bees.
Completely ignoring him. He's like white noise to them at that point. I think that he does get exercised from the band. I think that would have been a little more interesting to see how that they would have pushed him out of the band and how that all went down. That's got to be a humbling thing. You were one of the centerpieces of the band, and you're now kicked out.
True.
That's like if I got kicked out of this.
Right.
Exactly.
We kicked him out of the podcast, right?
Exactly. It's obvious to all of us watching that he's on a rebound from something. This is one of the unfortunate parts. We're left to wonder if he was kicked out of the band. We're making that assumption.
I think it's a good assumption, though.
And he misses her. We all know that he's not deep enough to maintain that. He's going to start another band or find another band, and he's going to fall right back into the same rut. That's why he says that he's never going to leave the apartment.
Is it weird that she likes him for his talent? I mean, that's what she talks about at the beginning of this movie, is that she loves him for the talent. I get this feelings because of how talented my boyfriend is.
But she's got those rose-colored glasses on.
Right.
She's into him. She digs him.
But why? But that's the thing is why, though? Because we know he's not really talented.
Because ultimately, he's kind of cool.
One thing about him that we do like is that he's perfectly honest. He doesn't ever really lie to her. It's not like he...
Oh, no.
You know, the only thing he might do is might unplug the answering machine. But outside of the answering machine, he tells her, hey, you know, I do see other people.
Oh, no, yeah, he tells her straight up.
Yeah.
No,
she doesn't hear it.
She's into
That's why,
him.
but I just don't really care for this relationship. But we need to tackle a little bit more on Steve and Linda's relationship before we, of course, do our final reviews, because this movie really is about them than anybody else.
I agree.
They go
They're
through
the main characters.
A lot of ups and downs. I don't know how I feel about throwing the pregnancy in there, but she did need something that forces her to retreat and run away. I didn't really particularly care the fact that as soon as that all happened, that his apartment turned into a pigsty, and it was...
Well, he had lost everything.
Bridget,
he went into a depression.
But I mean, still, Bridget finally goes into his apartment, goes through the window, and she doesn't even really comment about how disgusting the place is.
She's trying to be nice to
She's
her.
trying to be nice, but it is nasty. Would you imagine what the smell must have been when she opened up that window?
It is. Yeah.
I mean, there was no reaction at all to that smell probably that was happening. And his smile when he was like, hey, it was this scary look. I'm going to murder you right now. Come on in.
This is where you see that she's actually a very nice person.
Mm-hmm. A good friend.
She cares for him.
Yeah.
And she knows that he's hurting. He's lost everything.
Right.
He's lost his job, which is a very Office Space moment where the whole cube falls apart.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
He just closes the drawer and everything just falls apart.
boom, yeah.
Right. And it's kind of like a microcosm for his whole life. Everything just falls apart. I feel bad, legitimately bad for the two of them, because it's obvious that they both like each other. This is where I understand Steve's character. He overthinks a lot of the stuff, like when he's trying to decide whether or not to call her. I can relate to that.
His friends don't help either.
And how many people at 22, 23 get the best advice from their friends?
Who are they getting their advice from? Their friends.
Friends.
They've seen other relationships. Like they said, hey, remember those other relationships that were you in? If I would say I love you to a girl way too soon, that relationship was over. So there were things that you had to be careful that you didn't press on too much, that you didn't call the girl right away. Though if you had a sexual relationship with her, you better call the next day. You don't wait 4 days to call her.
Words of wisdom from Ken.
Yeah,
Life lessons from Ken. That's my next podcast. Life lessons from Ken.
The more you know.
Yeah, but I kind of related a little bit with his character in that sense, because if you did do certain things too fast or too slow, like I would go into a relationship and be way too fast and lose the girl, and then I would be in the next relationship and try to take things slower and lose the girl, because they were different people and expected different things, and I didn't adapt well. When you bounce from relationship to relationship, you try to do it based on your last relationship and learn from the mistakes. When it's a brand new relationship, those mistakes might not apply here. So I think that's the problem that Steve was having during this time frame, was his other relationships.
They're the reason that one of the reasons that I really like this movie. I believe their story. I like their story a lot. I legitimately felt bad for them when they get hit by the truck. That's heartbreaking. That is really tough.
I would have liked to see a little bit longer for that to happen, because it happened really early in the pregnancy. We just found out it turned blue, and then all of a sudden they're having this conversation about getting married, and then boom, they get hit. I would have liked to seen a little bit more space. Maybe she's 3 months pregnant or something to that extent.
So you want it to be even more traumatic. Fun times with Ken. Well, I want there to be more hurt.
Yeah, they just found out it was really quick. The one thing I will say that set that up really well.
We really don't know how much time has passed.
It seemed like it was instantaneously, but one thing that did set it up.
It does seem like it.
One thing that does set it up, she's on the couch saying, it would be interesting to have a baby. That's the one thing that she says on the couch that sets it up well. He's like trying to find his shoes. I'm thinking he's going to walk out the window there for a second. Where's my shoes at? You're talking about a pregnancy and you're asking where your shoes are at? That's kind of like a warning sign right there. No, I agree with you mostly. I do think this is the right couple here. I appreciate some of the things they go back and forth with. I'm not thrilled when she comes back from Alaska and they're having that conversation and they both are like, let's just be friends. When we know he doesn't want to, and he's picking her up.
And she really doesn't either. She's still trying to handle.
Right, and I would have liked...
She's going through the grieving.
I would have liked to seen another week or two, like them trying to get their relationship back on, and she says, you know what, this really isn't working, and then he says, okay. Not when she comes right back. He's been waiting for her, well, how long was it? A month?
Something
yeah,
like
something
30
like
days.
She's had time to think about. She's still obviously hurting.
Get rid of the Debbie character. Add a little bit more time between these relationships. I think you have a better story.
And then you take out one of your favorite parts of the movie.
Still have it. It's just that's the only part she really has.
The movie's an hour and a half, 99 minutes?
Right, it's in 99 minutes.
You got a little bit of fluff you could pull out and put in.
He could have pushed it to an hour 45.
Easily.
I'll give you that. I think that their relationship is understandable. She comes back and she's obviously still in love with him. And she's hurting and she doesn't want to hurt his feelings. And he doesn't want to hurt her feelings. And we've all been in that sort of situation before, too. You just don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. And so your wires get crossed. It's just out of pure luck that she realizes that this Andy dipstick, he's just a complete waste of time. And that's not who she wants to be.
It's her safety net to fall back on.
She doesn't want to be old anymore.
I wish we would have seen her on the boat, maybe a cry scene, an emotional scene on the boat. We don't really have that emotional scene after the hospital. I would have liked to have seen it. I think it would have played better in when she came off the boat. So we know where we're at when she's coming off the boat. What is she going to do? Is she going to be with them? Or is she going to go away? But I think an emotional thing on the boat where she's crying, laying there in bed or something like that, and she's crying over everything. And then the other thing is going back with this Andy character.
I don't want to see any more of the Andy character.
Just the fact that she wanted a rebound relationship right after that. She should have just stayed away from relationships in general.
He's safe. They're not having sex because I don't think Andy's capable of having sex. I think he is.
I don't know. They met each other at
asexual,
like a condom party,
and he said he hates everybody.
What's the deal with the condom party?
That was so
weird.
Come with your favorite contraceptive.
Yeah.
Yeah. One lady was dressed like an IUD, and it was just wrong.
Really weird.
One of those stupid things you do in college.
I guess.
But when they meet, it's even awkward there. I'm not buying any of this.
He's
weird. I'm not buying this with their relationship. I'm not buying her buying into him, especially how we see how smart she is later on.
You see how fast she dumps his ass.
Well, yeah, but then we see her when she meets Steve, and he comes up to her and says, I have these options.
Oh, that's a horrible line.
These are bad
He's
lines.
giving her a line.
But I like her line. Her comeback is good because she's smart.
No, it is.
I like her character at the beginning of their relationship more than, let's say, in the middle. But overall, I think it's a good storyline. I think overall I do like it.
You just want more pain.
I just want more pain.
You want more pain.
Want more
trauma.
For a better movie, my friend. Makes for more real.
You want like public screaming breakups in the rain outside the coffee shop.
I need more pain and more Jeremy Piven.
More Jeremy Piven.
We don't need more Jeremy Piven. Cameron Crowe has brought up in a couple of different interviews, and I had mentioned it toward the beginning. He claims that Warner Brothers wanted to make Singles into a TV show, and he said no. If you take him by his story, they didn't really listen to him, so they still kind of created Singles, and that's how we came up with Friends. I can kind of see where there is a Friends-like aspect to this movie. One of his big things is that it's individuals, they're in an apartment building, and in the opening montage of Friends, they're all around a fountain. And of course, there's a fountain in the courtyard of this apartment building that's in Singles. Now,
and they're all at a coffee shop.
And they're at the coffee shop. The coffee shop's a big part of it. I can see where those dots can be created. The part that I don't necessarily agree with is Friends is something else that I was really into. Like, my wife and I rewatched the entire series when HBO Max started. I know a little bit about the history of Friends. It came out of a rivalry between NBC and Lorne Michaels over Saturday Night Live. They thought that they could create a primetime Saturday Night Live. They wanted to move Saturday Night Live to primetime, and Lorne Michaels said absolutely not. He basically told NBC, I'm bigger than NBC. He said, well, they said basically, we'll create our own cast and have a Saturday Night Live in primetime. So that's how they came about to try to put this all together. Now, if Marta Kaufman and I think it's Denny Crane, Kaufman and Crane, who created Friends, if they use some sort of a Singles as a template, I can kind of see that. They do kind of get into similar situations.
Rachel's and Ross's character going to go back and forth, because both of them have been hurt.
But wouldn't Steve and Kara Sedgwick's character, wouldn't they be more like
Monica and Chandler?
Monica and Chandler?
Maybe. Isn't Joey more like Matt Dillon's character, Cliff?
No focus.
Yes, that I can see. But Joey's a lot more likable.
And Debbie's character is more like Phoebe, because she's flighty.
Yeah, I could kind of see that. There's a big leap, in my opinion, between the two.
I'm sure the creators of Friends had seen Singles and had seen many other TV shows and movies and probably mingled a bunch of ideas into it.
Probably influenced a little bit by it. Yeah, I mean,
sure, a little bit, sure.
I mean, come on. Friends characters are about a bunch of 20-somethings, right? And granted, I think at the time they were more like 30.
I think they were in their 30s, but yeah.
I think the only one that was 30...
The oldest.
Lisa Kudrow was the oldest.
Lisa Kudrow and David Schwimmer.
I think most of them are in their mid-50s right now.
I think one of them is 60.
Yeah, so I would say, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, guys, well, let's go to our final reviews here. Let's start out with Ken. Ken, what were your thoughts on the movie Singles?
I don't know. It falls in a weird place for me. There's things I like about it. I do like the dialogue of this movie. Even though I'm not a big fan of the genre of music, I do like the music in here. I mean, we have REM in there a little bit. I like REM. So there were songs that I remembered when I watched this movie, and it did take me back to a simpler time, back before the internet. There was nostalgia for me because of when I really watched it at full length. but not all the characters clicked for me, like we were talking about with Say Anything. Lloyd Dobler's character I related to. These other characters, maybe because they're already successful in their fields, you have the environmentalist, you have the one who's making the super train, the rock star. They're a little further along here than maybe I was maybe at the time that this movie came out. The problem here with me is Cliff's and Janet's relationship and how it ends. It kind of blows almost any goodwill for me. It doesn't kill the movie for me, but it leaves me going, you forced a happy ending on me, and I'm not thrilled with that happy ending. Like I said earlier, if you flipped it around and had Steve and Linda's relationship be the one that ends the film, I think that's the way to go out. And I think that changes it for me. There are some little quirky things that I like. I mean, you throw in a mime, a Seattle mime. I think that's funny. And the fact that it's a mime that's supposed to give them directions, but really doesn't know where they're going either. So, so he's just tagging along and they're just trying to find this club together, I guess. This movie, like I said, it's in a weird place right here. So it's between a B- and a C+ for me. I mean, because of the newness for me, closer to a B- than I am a C+. But I think when the dust settles, I think I'm going to fall down to that C+ area because it's not a movie that I will ever search out again. It was okay for what it was, and I sat down and like, oh, that was a cute little film. But it doesn't have anything for me personally that draws me back to the movie. So this will probably be, unless I can't find anything on TV and all of a sudden it's there, this is probably going to be the last time I see it.
So sad. So sad. Well, for me, I kind of agree with Ken a little bit. I think it's a fun movie. I really enjoyed it, being, my virgin eyes and ears watching this movie the first time. On a plane especially, where you can get sidetracked pretty easily. I stayed very focused on this movie. I felt engaged. I liked the characters. I liked the plot. A little hokey. I mean, there's a few things that are kind of, a little mismatched here, some of the character placement, but there's some really funny scenes in here, and the music is incredible. I mean, there's no getting around that. I'm a big Seattle sound, grunge. I'm a rock fan, across the board. I'm actually really surprised that I did not watch this movie when it came out originally. Somehow it just slipped through the radar, kind of like Reality Bites, which I just recently saw. Movies like that of the era just kind of slipped by me, but I'm really glad I watched it. It's not one that I'm going to add to my collection, but I think it definitely has some positive chops on it. I think it's one of Cameron Crowe's better movies, and I'm going to give it a solid B-. All right, Ted, take us home.
Before I really get into it, it's ironic that you brought up Reality Bites. After I watched this, I turned on Reality Bites because it had been about as equally as long since I've seen Reality Bites as well. And I wanted to contrast because Singles and Reality Bites kind of act as the quote-unquote voice of our generation. I was struck by how negative Reality Bites is.
Oh, Ben Stiller's character is so negative.
It is.
Yeah.
The whole outlook on the entire being of what it was to be Generation X is completely negative, where Singles has much more of a positive outlook on life in general. So I'm glad you brought that up. To get into how I feel about this movie, like I said at the beginning of this movie when I was saying when I first saw it, I like the characters. I'm not a big fan of Cliff's character, but I like the characters. And you know what's really cool is now they're megastars. Unfortunately, Chris Cornell is no longer with us, but you get to see like Eddie Vedder when he still has the long hair and he's not at Cubs games singing the 7th inning stretch. And so that's where this movie really lies for me, is the music really hits here very similarly as Almost Famous does. Because it's a time and place, and like I said, this was my music. As I was moved and transitioned from being a little kid to actually finding my own taste in music. But as far as the movie goes, I also like these love stories. I think that the love stories are good. I think the Stone Gossard and Kara Sedgwick romance, I think, is very believable. I think their story is touching. It hits all the right notes. It's not overly negative. I mean, you do have the point where they do have to overcome a tragedy. And I think that's kind of with any romantic, quote-unquote, romantic comedy or romantic dramedy, where the characters have to overcome something. And I think it's very believable, and I think it's very touching. I think all of the other characters, and Matt Dillon and Bridget Fonda's characters, I know that they are their secondary love story, but I don't know if it's really a love story as much as it is two people just trying to find their voice. But I believe them. I like the fact that they have all these little people that are just peppered in through their stories. So I think it works. This is one of the few times I don't mind a happier-ish ending, because I think it fits. Yes, it's a happy ending, but it's also an ending of transition. And I think that's a big deal too, because you have the two characters, they're moving out of the apartment complex and they're moving on. So in that sense, it's not quite a happy ending, because you know that they're probably all going to go their separate ways. For me, this movie is a solid B. It's going to be a B because of the fact that there are some things that I don't necessarily care for. And I think Almost Famous is strictly an A. It's Cameron Crowe's magnum opus. And this is definitely a step down from that. But it's still a great movie. I don't know if I'm going to rewatch it soon. Watching it so much in preparation for the podcast, I'll be perfectly honest, is kind of tough. I'll eventually come back to this movie. That's where I land.
Oh, very, very cool. So we all really pretty much liked the movie. I mean, there wasn't anything really terribly negative about it. We're all pretty much kind of on the same plane overall, which is kind of cool. We all like Cameron Crowe. We think he makes a pretty quality movie.
Until we get to Vanilla Sky, at least.
Oh,
well, luckily we're going to dodge that bullet.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be moving on.
And where are we going to be moving on? What's our next flick we're going to be reviewing here?
So our next flick is our Christmas episode, which you all helped determine on what that would be. And it's going to be National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, starring Chevy Chase. Thank you for going on Facebook, and we had a really good turnout on the voting on that. Very excited to see how many of you participated in it, and also added a few more to the list. Moving forward, we are looking at next Halloween, October, a Halloween horror movie month, and maybe
spooky month,
and maybe next December, making that just a holiday month. If you nominate a Hallmark movie,
you're on the naughty list.
You know, as a sidebar, earlier this week, listening to, I'm going to say it, I was listening to a competing podcast on the airplane.
You what?
I know. Blasphemy. And they were talking about one of my favorite movies of all time, which I haven't seen in quite some time, and it's very topical to Thanksgiving. Anyone want to take a stab?
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Because really, that's the only one.
So me and Jennifer sat down, we watched that movie, and I forgot just how great of a movie that is.
This Christmas, the three of us are going to be the merriest bunch of assholes this side of the insane asylum.
Oh, that's right, Clark. That's the gift that keeps on giving all year round.
That it is.
From time to time, we will have these polls, so keep an eye out. And thank you for supporting us. We got our year-end numbers, and they were really nice to see. And we are now internationally known abroad in places like Switzerland. Yes, people in Switzerland have listened to
Germany.
The movie.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of Switzerland, where can they find us on the World Wide Web?
We can be found on Twitter at @themovie_marquee, the 2 E's. And whatever platform you're listening to us on, Spotify, Apple, or Anchor, give us a like and give us a review. That'll help more people get to see us throughout those platforms. Don't know how it works, but those likes and those reviews help.
Wonderful. Anything you want to jump in there, Ken?
You could check us out also on Facebook, the Movie Marquee with 2 E's. Just request to join. We'll review your application. Blood test,
union dues,
things of that nature.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's a fun community. We are getting more and more interactions. Very excited about that. And as Ted said with Twitter, feel free to join in the conversation, but also share posts, share the tweets, share the Facebook postings. The more you share with others, the more listeners we get, and the more listeners we get, the more often we're going to be able to do this. I think this is crazy, but there are a number of you that listen to our podcast and never seen the movie. And
That's awesome.
And you have told us, I watched the movie based on your guys' review of the movie. I think that's cool. I don't know if I would do it personally myself, but I think it's cool.
All right. Well, on that note, let's end this one. Gentlemen, it's always been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you at the movies.
All right. See you next time at the Movie Marquee.